My name is George Chuvalo. I'm a former fighter. My professional record is 97 pro fights, 78 wins, 71 by KO, and I'm kind of unusual in the sense that I've never ever kissed the canvas, never been knocked down in my 97 pro fights, and I'm kind of proud of that. My first interest in boxing was sparked by me walking into a cigar store, like a convenience store, and I saw the magazine rack, and I spotted a magazine with a fighter on the cover. It was called The Ring Magazine. It called itself the Bible of Boxing, as it does today. And I opened up the pages, and man, I fell in love. The guys were all muscles and everything. I said, ooh, I want to be a fighter. I went home, Ma, I'm 7 years old. I said, Ma, give me a set of boxing gloves. I want to be a fighter. So it took my mother a couple of years to get me a set of boxing gloves. She bought them at Eaton's, which was one of the largest department stores back in those days in the 40s. Not around today, but it was around big time then. Anyway, she got me a set of boxing gloves. Either it was for my 9th birthday or Christmas around that year. And I took the gloves, and I remember going across the street to the macaroni field, and that was the unpaved parking lot of Lancia Macaroni, a pasta factory, which was kind of directly across the street from where we lived. And I would take the gloves, and I would box with a bunch of my buddies. And what I did was take some of the tricks I learned from reading sports cards in Wheaties cereal boxes. Wheaties cereal box those days called itself the Breakfast of Champions. And they used to have these sporting cards, and they used to have different moves made by different athletes with different sports, be it basketball, baseball, hockey, or boxing. And some of the boxing cards had Joe Louis on them. Joe Louis, the great champion of that time. And it would show Joe throwing a jab to the body. Next time he would throw a jab, would throw a fake to a jab, fake a jab to the body. The guy would drop his hands. Then Joe would hit him a left hook to the head. And that was all explained on the cards. So I would take these little tricks, so to speak, and apply them to the guys I was boxing with, and so I would generally do quite well with these guys. So one day, an older guy, who was about 19 or so, said to me, "Hey George, you're pretty good with your dukes. Why don't you go to a gym?" I says, "Where's there a gym?" He said, "At St. Mary's Polish Roman Catholic Church." It was about a mile away. So I went there. By now I was close to 10 years of age. Anyway, I went to the gym. I started training. They had a guy training fight. He was an older guy who was a one-time pro. His name was Mickey McDonald, the same name as a very infamous bank robber in those days in Canada. But anyway, Mickey McDonald trained the kids. He was in his 40s at the time, a nice man, and he trained us. And it wasn't a great gym. It didn't have a ring in there or anything. But so we started with no ropes. We just moved all over the basement floor. But they had a floor-to-ceiling ball which would punch, and they had a couple of heavy bags, and an exercise table. But it was sufficient for us at the time, and that's how I started. And my first fight, at the age of 10, 85 pounds, and that's how it all started. I think my most important fight, as far as most people are concerned, when they think about me, when they think about George Chuvalo, when the average guy thinks about me, they'll think about my first fight with Muhammad Ali. I think that was the most important fight of my life that way, in the minds of people. So when they think of me, that's the one fight they think of, the first fight. And it was a very important fight, of course. It was for the heavyweight championship of the world. It was with Muhammad, who already at the time I had fought him has developed a great reputation. He ended up being one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, one of the greatest fighters of all time, and it was a big fight. And at the time I fought him, it was in the midst of a lot of chaos. It was in the midst of civil unrest in the United States, the civil rights movement, the Black Panther Party, the emergence of black Muslims in the United States, Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Vietnam War, Muhammad Ali's refusal to go into the war, about getting drafted, his comments with respect to the Viet Cong. I got no quarrel with the Viet Cong, and in the midst of all that, and of him being threatened to go to jail if he didn't go into the draft, if he wouldn't go supposedly support the troops in Vietnam and be part of all that. He was going to face jail time. It was a tough time. It was a very somber time. So when I fought Ali, it wasn't the kind of the reckless spirit, so to speak. He was, very somber, Muhammad Ali. When I fought him, it was a very somber, serious time, a very dramatic time, and it was easily remembered. And of course, it made, I think, a great impact in sports at that time, and because it wasn't just sports, by the way, it was also political, and it was also about civil rights. It was some heavy things going on. America was undergoing a great change at the time. If someone was asking me about if there's a political bent to my fights with Muhammad Ali, I guess I could say yes, but I don't really think so. First of all, I'm not an American. I'm a Canadian. So if I'm fighting Muhammad Ali in Toronto, that's one thing. If I was a white guy, which I am, fighting Muhammad Ali, a black guy, down south someplace, it would have a different slant. But me fighting him in Canada was kind of like saying we're apart from the United States. We don't necessarily approve of all the craziness going on in the United States because we didn't have that history. Mind you, we had a bit of that history a couple hundred years ago that most Canadians aren't even aware of. I'm talking about segregation in Ontario and in southwestern Ontario, I think in Nova Scotia at one time. But most people aren't even really aware of that. But anyway, there are a lot of things going on in the United States at the time. I mean, like, that civil unrest was starting to catch fire like wildfire, and there were a lot of it was the emergence of Martin Luther King. It was the emergence of black Muslims that were headed by Elijah Muhammad, and later on Malcolm X, and a lot of things were going on in the world. It was like the world was in change, and just like Bob Dylan said, times are changing. It was a different time, and when you're in the midst of all that, sometimes it's kind of hard to realize what is happening. It's happening, but you're aware of it, but you'll be more acutely aware of it later on in life. When you look back in retrospect and say, oh man, that was a wild time. That was a crazy time. That was a time of change. That was a time when things are happening. Sometimes you're not as aware of it as later on when you look back and reflect and say, oh man, that was really something. That was really a dramatic time in history. And even when I fought Muhammad, when I see the old films, I see Muhammad and myself in the center of the ring, and a lot of times you don't focus so much on the pre-fight instructions, but the pre-fight instructions to us in the center of the ring was a very dramatic time, and we're kind of eyeballing each other, kind of trying to outstare each other, and it was almost like. It wasn't almost like, it was like you're going to war, you're going to war, but it was almost like we're standing for other things, standing up for other things. I know why and it wasn't so much. I'm trying to, it's what I'm feeling, and I'm having a little trouble expressing, but it's kind of like you're standing up for certain values. You're standing up for something, and especially with Muhammad, because he was in the midst of all that. He was in the midst of making a statement for his country. He was in the midst of saying, hey, I'm not going to do that. The brown-skinned people of Vietnam aren't bothering me, and while things are still going on in the United States at that time, with segregation and so on, he didn't feel like fighting for against the people who were really bothering him. So he's standing up for a lot at that time, and I guess in my own way, I was saying, I guess he's right, but yet, even though we're on the same side, and the same side. Perhaps politically, we're still fighting each other because we're still fighters. And no matter where you come from, and no matter what you are, when you're called to fight, that's your job. You're a fighter. And you're kind of funny. I always say you fight somebody, and what happens after the fight? You become friends. It's kind of crazy. You share a piece of history. And Muhammad Ali will always share that piece of history, especially the first fight. Because they keep showing it all the time on ESPN. They keep showing it all the time on television. So when people see me, that's the fight they're more apt to see me. When they think of me fighting Muhammad because it's shown so often on television. It shows me fighting Muhammad over and over and over again, and they don't show me fighting anybody else. when he came up here to fight me, there was a lot of pressure on him. I felt kind of when he came to Toronto, it was kind of a relief. Because I would see pictures of him in training, and he would talk about how enjoyable it was to be here in Canada. How enjoyable it was to be somewhere where he wasn't feeling the intense pressure. Even though he would still have pressure, it wasn't intense because he was in another country, a more relaxed country where it wasn't that intense pressure. First of all, we didn't have people fighting in Vietnam at the time. At that time, a lot of war resistors, a lot of draft dodgers, if you will, were in Canada seeking asylum in our country. So we were kind of like the country that was kind of siding with Muhammad at the time, and we welcomed him with open arms, and he felt very welcomed here, and that part was good. The only part I didn't like about the fight was that the Ontario Athletic Commission didn't deem it a heavyweight title fight. Everywhere else in the world, it was a title fight. New York City, Tupelo, Mississippi, Miami, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, Tel Aviv, Israel, Saudi Arabia, in Lebanon, in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, England, Venezuela, everywhere else in the world, it was a title fight. If I win the fight, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. But the Ontario Athletic Commission, in its gutless way, in its unique gutless way, said we won't recognize this fight as a heavyweight championship fight. We're going to call it a heavyweight showdown. I felt like Gary Cooper at High Noon. If you ever saw the movie Gary Cooper at High Noon, it's going to showdown. It'll be like shootout at OK Corral or whatever. I mean, what kind of baloney was that? If I would have knocked Muhammad Ali out, I wouldn't have been champion of the world. And that hurt me. And I said to myself, anywhere else in the world, by the way, all the other provinces in Canada would have recognized me as champion. Only in Ontario, my home province, they wouldn't have recognized me as the champion of the world. Because they felt that I didn't deserve a shot, even though I was number 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever it was in the top 10. They felt there was some negative publicity, and the publicity was really coming mostly from them. They thought I wasn't a worthy contender. I said, I don't know, you know what I mean? I started laughing to myself. I knocked out the guys that he had trouble with. I knocked out Doug Jones. A lot of people thought Jones might have beaten Ali before he was champion. Ali won by split decision. I knocked Doug Jones out. Just from that fight alone, I should have been considered a worthy contender, So I thought it was kind of unfair to me that way, and I was kind of hurt the fact that they wouldn't recognize me as champion even if I beat Ali. But everywhere else in the world, I would have. So that part was difficult for me to deal with. But anyway, the fight took place. I lost the fight. The fight was a well-accepted fight. It was a better fight than most people thought. Was I nervous fighting Ali? I'm nervous for every fight. Was I any more nervous fighting Ali than anyone else? I don't think. I guess bigger fights have more tension. I mean, it's hard not to have. If I fight a crowd in front of a couple thousand people, the next time I fight with 16,000, 17,000 people, it makes it feel more important. And no matter who I'm fighting, with that many people around, and naturally, it's a different buzz. It's a different feel. It's a different vibration. It's different. It's different, and especially with a guy like Ali, and especially when it's supposed to be for the heavyweight championship of the world. But not without the blessing of not with the blessing of the Ontario Athletic Commission. But as far as everyone else was concerned in the whole wide world, it was for the heavyweight championship of the world, and that's what it was. It was heavyweight championship of the world. I think of myself when you're fighting for the championship of the world. Before the fight starts, you say, my whole life could change after this fight. If I won the fight, would have changed my whole life. It would have changed the way my family would have been treated. It would have changed the way my family would have been blessed in so many ways, with how they would have been blessed, at least financially, and how things, in my mind, say, well, it would have been easier for my family in so many ways if I would have won that fight. It didn't happen, but that's a lot of things you think about before the fight, that you'll be kind of on easy street. You win the heavyweight championship of the world, you're on easy street, and your whole future changes. It changes dramatically if you win the heavyweight championship of the world. I lost the fight, tough fight, but I think I surprised a lot of people. A lot of people were surprised after the fight that I went 15 rounds, and I always say, not only did the fight go 15 rounds, but I say, guess who went to the hospital after the fight with bleeding kidneys? And guess who went dancing with his wife? Muhammad went to the hospital with bleeding kidneys, and me, I went dancing with my wife. And in my book, loser goes to the hospital. So that way, I think I won the fight. That's I always have fun telling people that, you know. But it was a tough fight, a lot tougher fight than people anticipated, a lot tougher fight for Muhammad, I think, than he himself even anticipated. And to me, I say, hey, I took the fight in 17 days notice. I didn't do too badly. Fighting 15, that's a long time. 59 minutes from start to finish. It's a long time. But it was a tough fight. I had a few bumps on my forehead after the fight, but I really didn't suffer too much damage. I wasn't cut. I didn't have any real problems after the fight. Let me put it this way. After the fight, I could say I lost the fight and I didn't realize a dream come true. But at the same token, I kind of gained a lot of respect from the boxing world after the fight. Some newfound respect after that fight. So in a way, it kind of compensated for the loss. I lost the fight, but there's kind of a new feeling about me, and kind of a new a sense of respect for me that developed after that fight because of that fight. So it was it kind of shaped me as a tough guy. It shaped me as someone with dogged determination and all that. And to me, they made Muhammad Ali like a kind of a god. So when you fight a guy who's seen as kind of a god and you do well, it only reflects on me. So it reflects favorably on me that way, because the fight turned out a lot different than most people thought it would turn out to be. So it was a lot. It made me come out in pretty good shape that way in terms of image after that fight. It kind of enhanced my reputation after that fight and solidified my reputation for the rest of my life in so many ways. A lot of people talk about my ability to take a punch, and there are some things physically that you're born with that enable you to do certain things better sometimes than some other people. There's a reason why certain people run faster. There's a reason why somebody perhaps is stronger than somebody else. There's also a reason why somebody can punch harder than someone else. There's also a reason why someone can take a punch better than someone else. And physically, when I look at myself and I try to analyze it, one of the reasons is I have a very short neck. When you have a short neck, that works to your advantage. And why? If I had a neck like a stack of dimes, and I get hit with a punch, my brain would be more liable to reverberate, more liable to be rattled. Having a short neck gives me that distinct advantage. Also, I think I still have a pretty thick neck. When I was younger, I had a thicker neck. I used to work a lot at developing my neck muscles, my whole shoulder girdle. And what I realized was at a young age was that a boxer should be like a football player. They're both contact sports. And it only stands to reason that if a football player trains to mete out punishment and also to absorb punishment, that same philosophy should be in the boxing game. If I'm trained to mete out punishment, I should also be training to absorb punishment. So I work hard, trying to work on heavy bag, work on sparring, work on developing my hitting muscles. I should also work on the muscles that help absorb punishment. So I worked a lot on my shoulder girdle. I worked a lot on my neck muscles. I should stand on my head for half an hour and move my head forward and backwards, side to side. And sometimes I'd be on the phone for half an hour talking on the phone and doing my neck exercises. I used to also chew a lot of bubble gum. Double bubble or whatever. I used to have protruding jaw muscles when I was younger, not so much when I'm older. And I think all those things helped me take a punch. I think I could naturally take a punch for a lot of good reasons. But plus, I have a bigger head than most guys. I think I have a fairly thick skull. I think that helps. I mean, it only stands to reason if you have a small head, not going to be able to take the same kind of shot, not because your bone structure isn't there. If you have a heavy bone structure, it works in your favor. And that's the kind of head I have. And I also have a short neck. And I also worked on my absorbing punch muscles, so my neck and my jaws. So that worked to my advantage. And maybe, who knows about nerve endings? Maybe there's other things in there that you don't really know about. But all I know is that I could take a shot a lot better than most guys for sure, and that helped me. And plus, I was a much better fighter defensively than I was ever given credit for. To be honest with you, if I could pat myself on the back that way, people say, "Why are you kidding? You a defensive fighter?" Yeah, I got hit very few punches on the vulnerable parts of my jaw, of my cranium. Most times when I got hit in the head, which is higher up, I wouldn't take many punches on more or less the vulnerable parts of my cranium, so to speak. So I got hit high on the head most of my shots that I got hit with. I never got hit too many shots around the jaw area, not really. Up higher in my head, around my eyes maybe, or around my forehead, but not down here, not this part of my jaw, not on the jaw, so to speak. And I was lucky that way. And plus also the fact that I blocked a lot more punches than I was ever given credit for. Because I think if I got hit with 1/10 of the punches people thought I got hit with, the 1/10 of the punches I was supposed to be hit with, I'd be in pretty bad shape. I'd be in pretty bad shape. But fortunately, that didn't happen. And for a fighter, I'm glad that I'm able to speak and that people can still understand me, and that they think, "Hey, George, you're not too bad for a fighter. You're okay for a fighter. You can speak okay for a fighter." So I'll take that. Well, we had 3 fights. They gave me one of them, but I mean, the first fight, I don't think I lost a round. Pretty tough to win in Montreal. I'm just being honest. Pretty tough to win in Montreal with the kind of fervor in Montreal. I wish I was from Montreal because the fight fans there are super. They are, but it was tough to win in Montreal. You'd have to knock the guy out. But Robert was a tough guy, good fighter. I don't think there's any question that I beat him the first fight. But anyway, they give it to me the second fight when I fought him I think I fought him at Delorme twice, Stadium, and outdoors, and I fought him in Montreal Forum. The one in the Forum they gave to me, but the other 2 fights, I mean, the first fight was ridiculous. I don't think I lost a round. After the fight, they raised his arm. I mean, what can I say? Like I said earlier, I wish I was from Montreal. It'd be a lot better. Anyway, the only fight I'm not really complaining about is the last fight. I got hit on the ear. Actually, my ear went cauliflower a little bit, and then it subsided, but I had trouble with my ear in the fight, and so I'm not complaining about that fight. It was a close fight to give it to him, but that fight was kind of close, but I'm not arguing about that fight. The only one I'm really arguing about, really, I guess, is the first one, that they gave him, which just shouldn't have happened. The second fight, they gave to me, but I was fighting back-to-back, and Montreal was a better fight town than Toronto. That's why I fought in Montreal. The pay was better pay. It offered more money. I couldn't get that kind of money in Toronto, Boxing is a big deal in Montreal. Fight fans in Montreal are behind boxing 100%. They love boxing. Boxing is a big deal in Montreal. The French papers are really behind boxing. When I fought Cleroux, I was surprised. I could look at the paper, I see about 7 pictures of myself in the paper. They had me doing road work, taking pictures. They had me even going to a church and lighting candles. They had me eating food. I mean, they had me doing, 7 pictures in one paper, one edition. It was unbelievable. That would never happen in Toronto, never. First of all, you have to fight for space in Toronto because of hockey. Hockey is also big in Montreal, but when it came to a fight, they gave it big time attention. And so in that sense, Montreal, especially the French press, is like no other in North America. I don't believe there's any other city in North America that gives attention to boxing, especially when you have a hometown favorite, somebody who's making some noise, somebody who's got a lot of potential. I mean, I think it was proven with with guys like the Hilton brothers, who aren't even really French Canadian, but they speak, I think, a little French. But Montreal got behind them 1,000%. They got behind Cleroux, of course, too, 1,000%. They got behind. I'm trying to think of now who's the champion. Lucas, the kid called Lucas, did very well, and Yvon Michel is doing a great job promoting, and they have the cooperation of the press. The press in Montreal gets behind fights, and when you make a fight, how do you make a fight appetizing? How do you make a fight an event that people want to see. It's when you write about it, you give it enough attention, you give it a proper attention, and you get the results that Montreal is getting. That would never happen in Toronto. First, never. It wouldn't, because they don't get behind a fight. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the sports media. They don't get behind a fight like they do in Montreal. Montreal gives it special attention, and it pays off. My fight with Yvon Durrell took place in Toronto. I fought him in Toronto on November the 17th, 1959. Yvon was a tough guy, but he was like he was a great light heavyweight, a very tough light heavyweight. Almost beat Archie Moore. Today he would have been champion of the world when he fought Archie Moore because he had him down 3 times in the first round. And I think most referees would have stopped the fight. But Archie was a guy with uncanny ability, a lot of heart, a lot of smarts, and he eventually knocked out Yvon in the first fight. I believe it was in the 11th round. But Yvon was a tough guy. When I fought him, he was, I think, 29 or 30 years old, which isn't really old, but in those days it was considered kind of old. And I remember after the fight, after I knocked him out, he said, "No wonder Chuvalo beat me. I'm an old man. I'm 29, but actually he just turned 30. Didn't realize he had turned 30 a couple weeks before the fight. It was just kind of cute, you know. But I really, when I think about it being old, I think Yvon was complaining about being 29, although he was really 30. I was at my prime around 31, 32. And sometimes, I guess it depends on who you are, but everything kind of melded together at, your physical ability and your experience and all, it kind of combined. So if I think of myself as being when I was at my absolute best, I'd say it was around 31, 32. That's me. I fought George Foreman in New York on August the 4th, 1970, and they stopped the fight in the third round. I don't know why they stopped the fight. I wasn't hurt. I got hit a good shot to put me on the ropes. Then he started throwing punches, all went out the window, so to speak, all over my head, and I throw a punch back, and Arthur Bricanti, the referee, stops fighting. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" I use stronger language than that, by the way, but basically I said, "What the heck are you doing? Why are you stopping the fight for?" You know what I mean? It shouldn't have been stopped. It shouldn't have been stopped. George Foreman has a stamina problem, especially in those days. He's got a little smarter when he got older. He kind of paced himself, but George lacked stamina, especially in the early part of his career. And I felt if the fight went a few more rounds, especially with George, the way he throws punches out the window, so to speak, I think I would have stopped him. I believe that. And people said, when I tell them that, they start laughing. I said, "But I know, I'm telling you." I fought Joe Frazier on July 19th, 1967. I got messed up in the fight because of a bad eye. I should have postponed the fight because I got hurt in the fight before I fought Joe. I fought on June 22nd that year, a month before I fought Joe, and I fought a guy called Archie Ray from Phoenix, Arizona, in Missoula, Montana. And I knocked Archie out when I hit him a left hook to the body. I think it was, I forget what round, in the early rounds. And I hit him a left hook to the body. And as I hit him a left hook to the body, he kind of jackknifed. And his head went like this, when it came down like this, and I knocked the wind out of him. And his head his forehead hit my cheekbone. And he dropped to the canvas, and they counted him out, and my eye started to swell. And I took some medication called Orenzymes, and after the fight, and they're supposed to help reduce the swelling, break up the swelling, reduce it. And I thought it was okay. I took it for a few days, and I was okay. But I went right back in the gym and I started sparring. But every time I started sparring, if I get hit in my cheekbone, it would start blowing up. So I told my trainer, I said, "I think I'm in trouble here. I gotta give my eye a better rest." But then you're fighting a guy like Joe Frazier, and if you don't train properly, if you don't get sparring, you're going to be in trouble. So I take the shot. I worked hard at the gym. I was in good shape. And I remember talking to my manager, trainer, about postponing the fight, but they all said, "Oh man, we can't blow this fight, man. This fight is important. We're gonna be in New York City, all this stuff. If we do, we mess ourselves up with the promoters, all this stuff." So it appealed to the macho side of me. So I didn't postpone the fight. I fought Joe. I won the first 2 rounds. The third round, I got hit with a left hook, closed my eye immediately. I come back to the corner, and my eye was shut. after that one shot. The fourth round started. Went out, and after that, I was getting hit with punches I couldn't see. I had my hand up here, and because my eye was closed, I would see the punch, and all of a sudden I can't see the punch, and I was getting hit for free for about half a round. All of a sudden, I got hit with a left hook, and I could feel the eyeball go through my optic floor. And I winced, I guess I turned my head like that, and the referee saw me in obvious discomfort. He stopped the fight. Actually, I was fortunate that he did, because if he didn't, I would have been blind in that eye. And so after the fight, I went to a hospital, not the same night. A few days later, I went back to the hospital in Toronto, because that fight was in New York. I went back to Toronto, and I went to the hospital. They took x-rays, and they found out that my eyeball was had broken through the optic floor. So they took my eyeball out, put a piece of plastic, silicone in there, put my eyeball back in. They sewed me up, and that was it. And I fought for how many years after that? 1967, for 14 years after that. No, 12 years after that. So, but the American Medical Association wanted to stop me from fighting. They said I shouldn't fight because of my eye, because the optic floor was damaged. But I fought for another 12 years, and it didn't bother me after that. But that fight, I'm not taking anything away from Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier's a hell of a fighter. He's relentless, and he's a good puncher, and he's steady. He's relentless, and he's a great fighter. But I still would like to fight him if my eye was okay. And I shouldn't have fought that fight, but it's not Joe's fault. It was my fault, because I should have stood up for myself and said, hey, I got to postpone the fight and fight him later on. Maybe the same thing would have happened, but I think I would have got my eye wouldn't have been quite as tender as it was in that fight. Well, first of all, boxing is a tough life, but sometimes life outside of boxing is even tougher. I had 7 people in my family. My wife and I had 5 children, 4 sons and a daughter. And 3 of my sons got involved with drugs, with heroin. And I lost 3 sons to heroin, because of heroin. And I lost my wife, who committed suicide after the loss of our second son. So in the midst of all the craziness that was going on with drugs, in the midst of me looking for my sons when they're on drugs, finding them in alleyways, finding them in parks, finding them in parked cars or parked trucks passed out on drugs, is a terrible part of my life. And after I lost 2 sons and my wife, I lost my wife 4 days after I lost my second son. And that compounded with the loss of my first son was tough to live with. I was in the abyss of misery. It was like I didn't know what was going on. I was not only in misery, but I was like I walk around like a zombie. I didn't know what was happening. I was like abandoned in the ocean on a raft. I didn't know where I was going. I was so messed up. I couldn't. When I look back, I realized how fortunate I was to find peace in my life to some degree, and I have to attribute a lot of that to my second wife, Joanne, whom I met, and it kind of was my salvation in so many ways, because she saved me in a lot of ways. Kept me grounded as much as I could be in a very difficult time, and gave me hope for a future. Because if you don't have any hope, then the future is bleak. If you don't see yourself with any hope, you don't see yourself surviving. And if I didn't have any hope, I couldn't have survived. Anyway, I got married on January 27, 1995. And with Joanne and my family, it made things a little easier for me. But tragedy struck again, because a year and a half later, my son Stephen died, my second son. And I didn't know what to do at the time. I remember I didn't know my whole life turned upside down. I said I had 5 kids. I lost 3 of them. I lost my first wife, and I was with my second wife at the time. But I had the good fortune of having a wife like I did in terms of Joanne, because she was a nurse. She had a history of helping people who were afflicted with drugs. She was a drug counselor, and as well as being a nurse. And so she understood the problems of my family, and all of a sudden I started getting some calls to speak, just at a couple of schools, doing a favor for an individual. He says, "Can you do me a favor and come up to Huntsville in Ontario and talk at my brother's school? He's a teacher there. He's a principal there. Can you talk there?" So I went up there, and I didn't have any real set speech or anything. I just spoke. Whatever came out of my mouth just came out, and I spoke, and the people there were kind of impressed, and then they suggested that I keep doing that. I said, "Well, I don't know how it's all going to take place." I was still in a bit of a fog. I was still kind of like in another space, so to speak. But anyway, CBC decided to do a story on me. And this story actually took place actually 9 months and 15 days before my son Stephen died. It took place when he was in jail for his 35th birthday. And they did a half-hour program on me, and it was shown on December the 5th, 1995. 2 days later, on December the 7th, I got a call from a charity and asked me to go around the country, if I would go around the country speaking to young people. They wanted me to go around with my son Stephen. I talked to Stephen on December the 7th, and I told him of what had happened. I'd spoken to a charity that they wanted he and I to go around the country to speak to young people about drugs. He thought it would be a great idea. But my son died 11 days after coming out of that particular facility. He came out on August the 6th, 1996. 11 days later, August 17th, he died. Overdose. At my daughter's place. He was supposed to come with me to make our first presentation on September the 16th at Pine Ridge High School in Pickering, Ontario, just outside of Toronto, but he wasn't there. So I made the speech a month after my son died. Anyway, I spoke there at Pine Ridge, and then one school tells another that, and by word of mouth, I started getting calls. I started going to different schools. Then I got a website started, and the next thing you know, I have a foundation. And I've been speaking to schools now since 1996, last 12 years. And I say to myself, or people say to me, "Why do you speak?" I say, well, one of the reasons is that if I didn't speak, it'd be like my sons died in vain. Because my sons died, and because I speak about them, I speak about some of the horrible things that happened to them, because they were drug addicts. Because of what happened, I can help other people. I can help young people sometimes make the right choices at the most important time of their lives. Because being young is the most important time of your life. It is the time that you essentially make decisions that affect you for the rest of your lives. Decisions regarding education, sexuality, lifestyle choices, smoking, drinking, doing drugs, they're all made as young people, The decision to do well in school, to continue through school, and eventually go to university started when you're young, in elementary school and in high school. When you make those decisions that enable you to formulate good enough work habits to get out of high school into post-secondary education. Because education is so important today, especially this highly technological age. I speak to young people a lot about self-esteem, because some things I talk about are really echoes of my son's mind, by the way. He was going to talk to young people about so many things, about self-esteem. And what is self-esteem but what you really think about yourself, the raw truth, the way you see yourself deep down in your psyche, and how important self-esteem is. Self-esteem is important to all of us because it tells you about yourself, about feeling good about yourself. And your successes, however minor or however major in your life, add to your self-esteem. And your losses also contribute to your loss of self-esteem. So the better you do in school, the better off you are. You see a healthy future for yourself and your future family. Because young people think about those things. Even though you're young, you're 12, 13, 14, 15, you're still thinking about a future. And if you see a healthy, bountiful future, easier for you to be happy. If you don't see a bountiful future, easier for you to be unhappy. And the happier you are, the easier it is to make the right choices in life. The unhappier you are, the easier it is to get pulled off track, to make imprudent choices in your life. That's a simple fact. That's very simplified, but it's very true. So what I talk to young people about is love. I say love is what sustained me through my most difficult time. Love of my family, love of my children, love of my grandchildren, love of my new wife. They all help me sustain. They all help me to stay on track, to get back on track and stay on track. And I think love is so important. I always talk to young people about hugging and kissing your parents. Sounds kind of hokey, but it's not. It sounds so simplified, but it's not that. It is simple, but it's also very true. The closer you are to your family, the more loving you are with your family, the better off you are. Relationships are so important in life. Relationships with your family, relationships with your friends, they're all important. You have to be happy. And if you don't have proper relationships, you can't be happy. But it's also important to feel good about yourself, to feel happy about yourself, to make the right decisions as a young person. Take care of your body, take care of your mind. Healthy mind, healthy body, like the old Greeks used to say. A healthy mind, healthy body. And when you love your family and when you show love to your family, out of that love becomes respect. Out of that love becomes honor. Honor thy father and thy mother. It's one of the 10 Commandments, and it's there for a reason. Our forefathers knew what they were talking about when they talked about honoring your father and your mother. When you honor your father and your mother, you do honor yourself in a way. As you respect your mother and father, you also respect yourself. When you respect your parents, you don't want to disappoint them. When you respect your parents, you respect yourself. And out of that respect, you want your parents to be proud of you. You don't want them to be ashamed of you. You want them to be proud of you. So all those things, you have all the advantage of love and making you hopefully make the right decisions because you want your parents to be proud of you. So those decisions, that feeling affects your choices in life. That feeling affects the choices you have to make sometimes at very difficult times, split-second decisions sometimes, because today, young people are exposed to so many things that are incorrect and so many things that are false, like the false promise of using drugs that's going to make your life better. And that's a load of bunk. That's a load of crap. You're not going to feel better doing drugs. It will hurt you. It will kill you. It will ruin your life, and not only your life. Sometimes the lives of your family who continues to live, but in misery. It's hard to lose family. It's hard to lose a son. It's hard to lose a daughter. It's hard to lose a wife. It's hard to lose a husband. It's hard to lose people you love. It's hard. And so when you're on solid ground, when you have love in your life, when you're on solid ground, when you're doing well in school, and that's important, when you make the right decisions in life, when you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't do drugs, those are all positive things. Those are all the positive lifestyles. I always say to a young person when I see them in jail, I always ask them about education, because there's always two common denominators when I see young people in jail. Two common denominators usually. I say, how were you doing in school before you got to this particular facility? Usually one or two standard answers. Shake it or thumbs down, no good, no good. Most young people who get in trouble with the law don't do well at school. Hard to find an honor student in trouble with the law. And that's got to tell you something. Another one is smoking. I don't know why anyone would ever want to smoke a cigarette today. When I was a kid, the worst thing you knew about cigarettes, bad for you. If you want to be an athlete, don't smoke. But today, with all the information one is armed with, it makes you wonder why anyone would ever want to smoke a cigarette. Look what it says. You hear about it on television, you hear about it on radio, you hear about it in the newspapers, you read about it in the newspapers, in magazines. Smoking is bad for you. Look what it says on a cigarette package. Every cigarette package sold in Canada, basically, I'm not talking about illegal cigarettes. I'm talking about cigarettes, regular cigarettes in a package. It will carry a message from Health Canada, from our government, talking about cigarettes with all the stern warnings. Smoking tobacco can cause cancer. Smoking tobacco can cause heart attacks, strokes, emphysema, lung disease. Smoking tobacco can cause harm to your fetus during pregnancy. Smoking tobacco can kill you. If those same stern warnings were on packets of Campbell's tomato soup, Who would ever eat a can of tomato soup or drink a can of tomato soup? Nobody. Not unless you want to commit suicide. So when a young person smokes that cigarette for the first time, he or she disrespects themselves, essentially disrespects themselves. No right-thinking parent or grandparent, even if they smoke themselves, would ever want their beautiful child to smoke a cigarette. Not really. So when you do smoke that cigarette for the first time, you disrespect yourself. You take your first rebellious step against parental authority on a health issue. So I'm just saying, so when you smoke a cigarette, I'm just giving an illustration. I know I'm talking a little longer. If you saw two girls, identical girls, twins, dressed the same way, look the same height, same weight, features the same, two twin girls, let's say 16 years old, one smokes, one doesn't, and you said to yourself in your natural mind, which girl does better at school, smoker or the non-smoker? I know what you would say in your natural mind. Who does better? The non-smoker. If you said to yourself, which girl has been in trouble with the law, the smoker or the non-smoker? Your natural mind would say, the smoker. In your natural mind, if you said to yourself, which girl is more apt to be promiscuous, God forbid, would you say the smoker or the non-smoker? You would say the smoker. Your natural mind would tell you the smoker. So there's something to be said about that, about the loss of self-respect in so many ways. And that's why I talk so strongly against smoking. You go to a party one night, I say to young people, young high school people, 10 people your age, 5 smoke, 5 don't, and alcohol is introduced at the party. Which group is more apt to try the alcohol, the smokers or the non-smokers? It's easy as pie. It's the smokers. The people already disrespect themselves. Easy to have a drink. After a couple of drinks, your inhibitions are down. Someone introduces a joint at the party. A lot easier to try that joint if you already had a couple of drinks. A lot easier to try that joint if you already smoked tobacco. A step from smoking tobacco to smoking a joint, not that dramatic. Next step down the road could be hash. Next step down the road, prescription drugs. Next step down the road, crystal meth or ecstasy. That can kill you, sure enough. Next step down the road, crack, coke, or heroin. No one starts out by doing crack, coke, or heroin. They go through the preliminary steps, and more often than not, starts out with a simple cigarette. So that's what I talk to young people about. That's one of the things, one of the many things I talk to young people about. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I think I have a chance to affect young people. I think I have a chance to make them think very strongly about certain decisions that they have to make, that they're all faced with at some point in time in their lives. And if I didn't get feedback from them, from the teachers, from people, school administrators, from people in jail, from the people who run the jail, if I didn't get positive feedback almost on a daily basis, it'd be hard for me to keep going, It'd be hard for me to keep going. But I get that kind of feedback. I get that kind of encouragement that enables me to go on and to keep doing it. As long as I have the steam in my body, I'll keep doing it. So that's what I do.